Squibs might be one of the most underappreciated parts of the wizarding world, both to readers and to characters in the series. They are people born to a witch or wizard, but who possess no magical traits themselves, essentially putting them in this weird gray area between wizard and muggle kind. Today, we're gonna dive deeper into some notable squibs in the wizarding world, especially one squib who has the most remarkable story. Make sure you stay till the end of the video, because there I'm going to go over one of the most out there and interesting pieces of lore in Harry Potter. If you enjoy this video, please consider liking and sharing. It will greatly help the channel with the algorithm. And if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button, and you can also follow me on all of my other social medias, all of which are linked down below, and all of which house similar content that I make here on this channel. Now that I've said that, let's get into it. Obviously, the most well-known squibs are Argus Filch and Arabella Fig, but long before they were around, we have some other notable squibs. This includes Martha Stewart, who was the daughter of Isolde and James Stewart, the two founders of the American wizarding school Ilvermorny. Unlike Filch and Fig, she ended up leaving the wizarding world entirely, as she assimilated into the Muggle world. Then we also have the brother of Dolores Umbridge, which is another squib that many people probably don't know about, especially for characters in the actual series, considering that Dolores did all she could to hide this. Dolores ended up disowning her Muggle mother named Ellen Cracknell and her brother, never seeing them again. She also forced her father to never see them again, as she rigidly controlled him to the point of it being kind of disturbing. Something similar happened with Gilderoy Lockhart. He had two squib sisters taking after their Muggle father. It's incredibly rare to have one squib come out of a family, so having two was almost unheard of. The squib sisters ended up being neglected by their witch mother, who pretty much only gave her focus to Gilderoy because he was the only one to have magic. This admiration from his mother is also a big reason why he's so obsessed with himself. But perhaps the most interesting and notable squib was a man named Angus Buchanan, who is a character that is from deep Harry Potter lore. He came from a wizarding family that lived in a village on the Scottish borders. Angus was one of 11 children, being the third son. As time went on, he watched his older brothers and sisters get their Hogwarts letters and head off to start their magical training. Their father was described as fierce, and he was also boastful, proud that all 11 of his children were magical. However, he had no clue that his third son Angus had no magical ability. Mr. Buchanan had gone as far to say that a squib in the family was a sign that their family was in decline, and that if there was a squib, they would be cut out entirely. This of course made Angus want to hide the fact from his father that he himself was a squib. Luckily, his brothers and sisters, who were all very fond of him, helped protect him. They all ensured that their parents did not find out the true nature of Angus, and this worked very well. Angus played it off so well that when his father trained him and his siblings by shooting curses at them, he learned to simply dodge these spells, making it seem as though he was blocking them, never being hit by one. The cover-up that Angus and his siblings started was rather innocent at first, but quickly, this lie became harder and harder to keep, especially when the time came for Angus to get his Hogwarts letter and start his magical training. It quickly became clear that they could not keep this sham going on for much longer. But somehow, they successfully kept it going. When Angus's Hogwarts letter didn't arrive, his panicking sister Flora forged one, which kept the parents in ignorance for several more weeks. Angus was scared of his fierce father, and he played along with his older brother and sisters, desperate not to upset Mr. Buchanan. His siblings took him to Diagon Alley, where they bought him a wand, pretending that it had chosen him, clearly taking this lie even further. When it came time to go to Hogwarts, his brother Hamish took him to school on the back of his broomstick. This was about 4 years before the Hogwarts Express was put into place. They all hoped that if he was already there, Angus would be allowed to stay, or at best, the school might be able to pull some sort of magic out of him. This led to an event that had never happened before, and it would never happen again. When the sorting ceremony began, Angus, in sheer desperation, threw himself ahead of a girl whose name had been called, and the sorting hat was actually placed on his head. The fact that he actually made it this far is remarkable, and you really have to give credit to him and his siblings. However, this is where the sham was finally exposed. The sorting hat announced kindly that the boy beneath it was a good-hearted chap, but he was no wizard. The sorting hat taking the time to announce that Angus was kind-hearted really shows how good of a person Angus really is. But getting back to the story, this moment was a sight that would never be forgotten by those who witnessed it, and it would be one of those legendary stories that would be passed down to students for years. Unfortunately for Angus, he was humiliated. He took the hat off, left the Great Hall, and began sobbing. News of Angus's humiliation eventually reached his parents in a flurry of vows before their son arrived home. And crazily, Angus got home by walking on foot. I guess it wasn't too far considering that both Hogwarts and his house were in Scotland, but still, that's crazy. Angus's father was livid, and just as Mr. Buchanan had stated, he disowned his child for being a squib. When his son arrived home, he did not let Angus enter, told him he could never come here again, and actually fired curses at him as Angus ran off. What a scumbag. The 11-year-old Angus didn't really know what to do. He now had no family and no money. He eventually decided to walk to the capital of Scotland, occasionally hitching rides on carts. When he arrived, he lied about his age to find work as a laborer. To his surprise, Muggles were not nearly as bad as his father and mother had always told him they were. Eventually, Angus got some good karma, which was well deserved, as he was taken in by a kind foreman and his wife who had no children of their own. They gave him a very good childhood, loving him as if he were their own son. By the time Angus turned 18, he had grown into a big, strong man who was loved for his kind nature and admired for his physical prowess. Angus never shared the strange and traumatizing secrets of his past, as he had pretty much moved on from that part of his life. Having dodged curses his father shot at him during training, he was surprisingly fast for a man his size. This led to finding his greatest pleasure and pride, which came through using his athleticism. He quickly became skillful at the relatively new Muggle sport called rugby, and Angus soon caught the attention of scouts. With his large size and talent, he found himself representing his country in the first ever international rugby match, which took place in the capital of Scotland as Scotland took on England. Something really special then happened when he made his way onto the pitch, and it made Angus very emotional. All 10 of his siblings were sitting in the crowd to cheer him on, which warmed Angus's heart. As a group, they had all decided to go against their father, dismissing his contempt for all things Muggles, and most of all, from ever associating with their Squib brother. Elated, Angus scored the first try and led Scotland to win the match. This reunion with his family made Angus reevaluate his relationship with the magical world, and he eventually published a groundbreaking book which became a worldwide bestseller. My Life as a Squib. Until this point, squibs had kind of lived in the shadows. Many cut all ties with the magical world, instead living with the Muggles. And for those that did try to fit in the wizarding world, they were looked down upon and seen as second class. However, Angus's book made magical people see squibs differently than they ever had before. Angus Buchanan broke new grounds as he became famous and well celebrated in both the magical world for his bestseller, as well as in the Muggle world for his well-followed and successful career as a professional rugby player. A truly groundbreaking phenomenon then began to happen. Wizards of many nationalities began turning up to watch Angus play the Muggle sport, which to this point, wizards had never had an interest in, much less to any other sport that the non-magical played. Witches and wizards couldn't help but admire the strength and courage it took for the Muggles to engage in such a brutal sport without having magical remedies to heal their injuries. Going to these games also became one of the most prominent ways in which wizards and witches interacted with Muggles in a pleasant way, which is so huge. When Angus Buchanan died, he was honored in both worlds. Angus was a shining example of a person who made the most of what life had dealt him, and he emerged triumphant. Following his death, the Angus Buchanan Cup for outstanding effort is awarded at Hogwarts each year, and My Life as a Squib is on its 110th printing. And now we get to some of the craziest Harry Potter lore that I promised you at the beginning of the video. One thing that Rowling threw into the story is that many now try to smuggle a talented squib onto every Scottish rugby team, and some squibs that have succeeded in this include Kelly Brown, a possible cousin of Lavender Brown, Jim Hamilton, who has a strong resemblance to Hagrid, and Stuart Hogg, a real-life rugby player, who in Wizarding World canon is a squib. enough said.